Hello there, this is Douglas Rumbaugh. Now, one of the wonderful things about Linux is that oftentimes, in order to do something simple, you end up going down a rabbit hole, Googling for a little while until you finally figure out how to do it. And then you get that thing done, and you don't think about it again until you reinstall your computer and have to do it all over again. Now, I'm at about the fourth iteration through the cycle of getting ODBC drivers configured on my Linux computer now. And I decided finally to just sit down and write the frickin' process down. And so I've done that, and I wanted to record a video too, just perhaps to be helpful for how to get ODBC drivers properly configured on your Linux box. Now, this is a very bare minimum approach, but it does work at least for MariaDB, which is the thing that I most care about. So, let's get into it. What I have done is I have put together a simple little test program that I'm going to run here. And this program is going to connect to a database sitting on a remote server, just a little RAM node VPS that I set up. And it configures a connection string, connects to the database, runs a query, and I should see some query results should it work. Now, when you're setting up your PyODBC or really any ODBC drivers, right, you have to, what typically happens is there's a driver manager that takes care of it all. So for example, here, what I'm doing is I'm telling PyODBC to look in my driver manager for something called MariaDB and use that driver. Now the problem is even though I have installed the MariaDB ODBC drivers, so apt-get install ODBC MariaDB. I already have them installed. They're installed. If I run my DB test program, you can see I get an error in finding the driver. It can't open that particular library. So how do we get around that? Well, the standard ODBC driver on Linux, at least near as I can tell, is something called Unix ODBC. And specifically, we can also use a subprogram for configuring it called ODBC inst. So you want to make sure you have those installed. And ODBC inst, just like that. And I already do. As a matter of fact, at least on Pop! OS, these are installed by default. I suspect they're pretty much installed by default most places that use them. In any case, once you have these guys installed, what you can do is you can either use the configuration program or you can just do it manually. I'm just going to do it manually because it's simple and it works. There is a file in etc, so we'll go sudo envim etc/ and it is called ODBC inst.ini. Into this file is where we put the driver. So the way this file is configured is you say, I'm going to use the square bracket configuration section header and give your driver a name. So this is the name that you want to plug in to your connection string. So if I call it MariaDB, I want to put MariaDB. If I call it Bob, I want to put Bob, right? This is where you configure that name for searching. And then there's a couple different parameters you can set in this thing. You can set a description, you can set the location of the driver, you can set the location of a setup library. For MariaDB, all we seem to need is the driver. So what you do is you say driver equals, and then you specify the exact absolute path to the driver library on your system. Simple, right? Now the trouble is that it isn't immediately obvious what the location of the driver module on your system actually is. And just Google searching around for it often doesn't seem to help very much. And of course, if you don't know what it's called, it's hard to search for it on your system. So, as luck would have it, at least with Ubuntu, and I would assume this works with most other most other Linux distributions, if you go on over to the packages.ubuntu.com, the website for the package repository, and pull up in the version of Ubuntu that you're using and the name of the package that you're using, pull up the documentation page for it. There is this list of files down here. Now, if we click on this list of files, what it's going to do is give you a list of all of the files that are installed on your system by this package. So as you can see here, we have a bunch of documentation and user share doc, and then here, user lib blah 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 is the .so file. This is our library. This is the module that we have to link to the driver. So we can go ahead, copy this, go into here, paste her in, save our changes, and now that we have this, bearing in mind this is MariaDB, this is the location of the driver, we have it installed, all's good. Now, if I run my DB test program, it worked. So that's the trick, is you have to go to this /etc/odbc inst file .ini here, and you have to configure your driver location. This is where you give the name. And I should point out, we can make this name, as I've said before, whatever we want to make it. So let's call my driver Bob instead. So now that I've named my driver to Bob, my DB test program is going to break until I go in and replace this with Bob. And now she works again. So it's that name that matters. It's the name of the section header in the ODBC inst.ini file that controls what it is you need to call the thing in your ODBC using programs. So that is the quick and dirty way of getting an ODBC driver working and usable on Linux. Hopefully, I will remember this or be able to look this up easily and conveniently the next time I reinstall my system and have to do this. And I hope that you found this somewhat interesting. I will see you in the next video.